It is 1450 KMMS, 1340 KPRK. Dennis McNally, a Grateful Dead historian, a longtime publicist, and authorized biographer for a while for the band. It is the cliched question, but I have to ask it only because I took exception. There is a recent Bob Weir documentary that I
Uh-huh.
recently watched on Netflix. The question of drugs, and Bob even says in the documentary that he was assigned to hold for Jerry during his usage period, and that upset me. As a fan, knowing that Bob Weir knew the drugs were dangerous, yet willingly held them. Is the relationship between drugs and the Grateful Dead over exaggerated? Did I misinterpret something that Bob said in that specific part of the interview during the documentary?
No, I mean, yeah, it always depends on what when you say over exaggerated. With what it's hard. I mean, it's hard to say what is over exaggerated. Uh, Bob did do that for a while. It wasn't a common thing.
Mm.
The I get a lot of people say, why didn't you get him to clean up? And the answer is, among other things, have you ever had a friend who had drug problems? How much success did you have in getting them to clean up? The problem, and I'm not. This is not this is not hot news. Until the person wants to clean up, they're not gonna clean up. They're always going to have an inclination. Jerry was, as I say, about the music, very humble. But if he didn't want to hear it, he didn't hear it. And people tried over and over, and the band did interventions, and you name it. And the problem is, if he didn't want to hear it, which he didn't, he would simply go limp and say, "Fine, let's shut it all down." And then the band recognized that he'd just go play with the Garcia band and have no peers around other than John Conn, and unfortunately, John Conn had the same problems. So the answer is there didn't seem to be an answer, and it was the most frustrating thing in the world. It's also, for my money, one of the best things in the world that at the time he died, he was saying things that he never said. He was fully acknowledging the depths of the problem and was making conscious effort to change, which he, again, never, it was always, yeah, later on I'm fine. I mean, never would he really confront things. And he, the reason he died in a rehab facility, having already been in a rehab facility that had cleaned him up, was that he was serious, that he really did want to deal with it and deal. As I say, he said some things in the last couple of weeks of his life that really did indicate, at the very least, a real change in tune. And my slightly silly, but well, anyway, my point of view is that he made that in his heart, in his mind. He had made that commitment to stand on his own 2 feet and not be dependent. At which point his body said, "Thank you, we can leave now. Our work here is done," because he had, as I say, abdicated responsibility for good health. It's really tedious and unromantic. But the fact is that past 40, or in his case 50, certainly, you need to take responsibility. You need to do all this stuff that's not young, romantic, and rock and rolly, but real, and that is eat right, and exercise, and all this bourgeois stuff that he didn't want to deal with, and never did, not really, and so it caught up with him.
Dennis, in my personal musical evolution, I was in a big period of listening to the band. I mean, Big Pink and that band's self-titled album are still two of my favorite. And through that, I discovered Working Man's Dead and American Beauty. What was your introduction to the Grateful Dead musically?
I was a DJ. I don't know if I've ever told you this.
No.
I was a DJ at my college radio station. I got into college. I graduated high school in '67, so I got into college in September. And there was a brand new album lying around at that time, which was the Grateful Dead's first album, which had come out that March. So I listened to it a lot. I played it a lot, and enjoyed it a lot. And then for whatever reason, I did not, I was in the boondocks of upstate New York. And when I say upstate, I don't mean something like Ithaca or, Syracuse even. I'm talking about very near Ottawa, Ontario. So I wasn't going to a lot of concerts, okay? The Grateful Dead got all over New York State, but not that far north. And so as a result, I drifted away, and it wasn't until the fall of '71 when my best buddy became a Deadhead that I was, trapped in the cult, and I've never left.
1450 KMMS, 1340 KPRK. Dennis, how, from your unique perspective, spending so much time with the band and watching the interaction with fans, in the fans' culture, the culture of fandom that grew up around as Deadheads, as we now know them or refer to them, what is the mystique of the Dead?
The Grateful Dead did these two things. They combined rock and roll elements like amplification and electric instruments and certain song structures with true improvisation, which nobody else ever did. I could go into detail about why other bands, even those that improvised, didn't quite do it the way the Grateful Dead did it, but I'll argue that anyway. So there's this musical thing going on. And as Jerry said, Grateful Dead fans are like people who like licorice. Not everybody likes licorice, but the people who like licorice really like licorice. So in every group of people, there's this very small niche faction that really want the music to be different every night, to be new every night, not to be just entertained, but to be challenged. It's very difficult sometimes because improvisation introduces an element of uncertainty into the music. So that's one aspect of what they did. The other thing that they did, derived from the acid test, where they experienced not being entertainers, but being simply part of the show. In the acid test, everybody was the show. The music, whether it was by the Dead or by the so-called prankster band, was kind of the soundtrack, but it wasn't the point. The point was that every individual in that room was the show. And that's very different from being up there on the stage and entertaining these people down below you. And that was the genesis of a community, of a feeling of community, that, again, no other band has ever produced. There have been fans, lots of fans. But in terms of community, this feeling that we're all in this together, that this is a quest that we're all together on, that is unique in the Grateful Dead. And it comes down to something as obvious as when the band decided to allow taping, not only allow it, but organize it to the extent, because the reason it happened, the reason the decision was made to formalize it, was simply that there were so many people setting up microphone stands that the sound mixer, Dan Healy, couldn't see the stage. So it was like, guys, we have to deal with this. So they said, okay, we'll segregate them. We'll put the mic stands behind the soundboard where they won't block the people's sound sightlines or Healy's. Nice, useful solution. The real reason that nobody even for a minute thought of like banning them was simply that to ban them would have destroyed the ambiance of the shows. The only people that moaned and cried and complained was the record company, and it wasn't very hard for the Grateful Dead to ignore the record company. That what nobody realized at the time. It was simply to deal with the fact that they were lousy cops. What nobody realized was it was by demonstrating that kind of trust in the audience, because we said you can do this, but you can't do it for money, and that doubled our audience. It simply reinforced a bond that had already been there for a long time, of course, and it caused this explosion, incredible growth, so that between 1980 and 1987, which were the only, there was a studio album in 80, and then Touch of Grey came out in 87, we probably doubled or tripled our audience. And a large part of that was because, I say, of taping. It was a way of people connecting with the band, trading these tapes, communicating with each other, and, strangers stopping strangers and shaking their hands, the line in the song, and it really worked. And the end result was this enormous audience. And then, unfortunately, I say, we had a hit song, and it was unfortunate because it brought a lot of people who weren't really appreciative of the stuff that went along with the music. And we had all these crowd control problems, which was sort of a constant struggle from then until the end of the band. But that's by the side. The fact is that for any number of reasons, most notably going back to the acid test, the Grateful Dead had an attitude toward this audience that they were partners, not cattle with wallets. And that was unique, and it was honest. And a friend of mine was talking with somebody who was at the shows in Chicago, and he said, it was all great, and one of the best things about it, at all 5 of the shows, frankly, was that the Deadheads brought their A game. They were just perfect Deadheads. They were appreciative. They treated each other as well as human beings can treat each other in a crowded situation, and I was very proud of that, because that was one of the best things about the Grateful Dead was when Deadheads are great, they're so great.
It is 1450 KMMS, 1340 KPRK. My final question for you, Dennis. You referenced the Chicago shows earlier in this conversation. You referred to them as a gift. Did you breathe a sigh of relief knowing that a 50-year page in musical history had been turned with those final 3 shows?
Yeah, I did. I mean, it was appropriate to acknowledge it, God knows, both for the band and for the audience. But it said fairly well, and I can live with that. It's a great thing, but all things end, all things must pass, and it was time.
Dennis McNally, Grateful Dead historian, personal friend of mine, author, latest book on Highway 61, Music, Race, and the Evolution of Cultural Freedom, which I believe is a must-read for any musical fan or fan of cultural awareness as to where we are now. And forthcoming book, Jerry on Jerry. I look forward to that. I do appreciate your time today.
Any old time.